Hi everyone, welcome to Neurodiverse World, the channel where neurodivergence is explained with respect, clarity, and solid science. Today we're going to talk about a sensitive yet extremely important topic: delayed diagnosis and its emotional impacts. Many autistic people only receive their diagnosis in adulthood, sometimes after years of living with challenges without truly understanding where they came from. And this delay can have profound emotional consequences that need to be recognized and discussed. What I'm sharing here is based on science, research, and clinical protocols, not just personal opinion. Before we dive into the emotional impacts, it's important to clarify something. Screening is not the same as diagnosis. Screening means identifying possible signs or red flags that suggest there might be a condition, often through questionnaires in schools or during medical checkups. Diagnosis, on the other hand, is a thorough clinical process carried out by qualified professionals. It involves behavioral evaluations, interviews, family history, and sometimes standardized assessment tools. Why is this distinction so important? Because many people go through screening without ever being referred for further evaluation, or their signs are subtle and overlooked, especially in women and individuals with so-called mild autism. This gap between the first signs and the official diagnosis is what we call delayed diagnosis, and it can significantly affect a person's emotional, social, and even professional life. One of the first emotional effects of this delay is a constant sense of inadequacy. Many people who are diagnosed later in life report that, for years, they lived with the feeling of being different, or even broken. Without the scientific explanation that autism provides, they often interpret their struggles as personal failures. Questions like, why can't I socialize like everyone else? Why do I get overwhelmed so easily? Or, am I just too lazy? Become a constant inner dialogue. This lingering sense of not fitting in can follow someone from childhood into adulthood, eroding self-esteem and making it difficult to develop a positive sense of identity. Another very common impact is the development of secondary conditions like anxiety and depression. Research shows that delayed diagnosis is directly linked to a higher prevalence of these mental health challenges. Without knowing that certain reactions are part of autism, people often push themselves to adapt to a social model that doesn't match how their brain naturally works. This constant effort to fit in leads to emotional exhaustion over time. Eventually, this may escalate into chronic fatigue or even what's known as autistic burnout. Closely connected to this is the phenomenon of social camouflage. When there's no diagnosis, many autistic people learn to mimic gestures, facial expressions, and speech patterns to blend in socially. It's like wearing a mask every single day. But masking isn't natural. It requires immense energy and causes high stress. Later, when the diagnosis finally arrives, many people feel the painful realization that they spent years hiding their authentic selves and living a life that didn't represent who they truly are. This process also has a strong impact on social relationships. Without the diagnosis, many interactions are misinterpreted. Classmates or co-workers might see autistic behaviors as coldness, arrogance, or lack of interest. Within families, difficulties in communication can be mistaken for emotional distance. These misunderstandings, combined with the constant effort to camouflage, often make it harder to build healthy, lasting relationships. The consequences also extend to academic and professional life. Without a diagnosis, people often miss out on the accommodations and support that could make a huge difference. In school, a child may be labeled as inattentive, lazy, or disruptive, instead of receiving appropriate educational support. In adulthood, the lack of diagnosis can limit career opportunities, since the person doesn't know how to advocate for necessary workplace accommodations. Over time, this leads to frustration, the feeling of always being a step behind, and once again reinforces low self-esteem. Another crucial point is the reconstruction of identity once a diagnosis finally arrives in adulthood. Many people describe this as a deeply emotional and sometimes conflicting process. There's relief in finally understanding their lifelong struggles, but also anger and frustration over the realization that they could have received help much earlier. Some experience grief when thinking about missed opportunities or years lost to misunderstanding. Coming to terms with a late diagnosis requires reinterpreting one's entire life story through a new lens, and that can be overwhelming. On the other hand, it's important to emphasize that even a late diagnosis can be transformative. Access to psychological support, therapy, peer groups, and neurodiverse communities can help individuals embrace their identity and build a healthier relationship with themselves and others. Discovering who you are, even later in life, can be liberating as long as it comes with understanding and the right kind of support. And here's something crucial. If you or someone you know resonates with these experiences, it doesn't automatically mean there's an autism diagnosis. What it does mean is that there are important signs that deserve proper evaluation by a qualified professional. Screening is not diagnosis, and only a clinical assessment can provide that certainty. If today's content made sense to you, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could benefit from this information. Here on Neurodiverse World, we bring science explained clearly and respectfully, so you can better understand how the autistic brain works and how society impacts this process. Your participation is essential for us to keep growing and sharing high-quality, evidence-based content with more and more people. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. Sending you a big hug, and see you in the next video.